in the first 6 months. That's more than 9/11, that's more than Pearl Harbor. This was a tremendous disaster. So, but in any event, Hartigan's poked around. He knows he can close on this ship, and they get in front of Jack's Beach. And Jack's Beach it's a Friday night. It is lit up like a Christmas tree. There are 2 Ferris wheels, there's a roller coaster, there are people driving up and down the beach, and the Jacksonville Beach Volunteer Fire Department is having its first annual Fireman's Ball on the old wooden pier with the 7-Up sign. In fact, out there, it's there. See the 7-Up sign, how it glows? I love that in that picture. And so Hartigan closes on him. He comes in behind the Gulf of America. And what he should have done at this point is he should have gone back out to sea, gone around the buoy that marks the St. John's, and tried to intercept this oil tanker again off of St. Mary's or Brunswick, Georgia. But he doesn't. He's coming in, I'll do a thing, he's coming in at an angle, 45-degree angle behind. What their Germans really wanted was to be at that 90-degree angle, to give them the best chance to hit with the torpedo. He's coming in at a 45-degree angle behind. I mention this because I think it's important when we talk about why he's going to do what he does next. But he shoots from about 2,000 yards, he fires the torpedo. At around 10:20 at night, by the official time. And he fires his torpedo at this 45-degree angle. It takes too long to hit. He thinks he's missed. He thinks he's wasted his second to last torpedo. And then suddenly at 10:24, there's this huge explosion 4 miles out to sea, almost immediately off, a little south of where the Jack's Pier is now. So right out there, right off the coast. People come running from everywhere. People are already on the beach. People are already in the beaches, in the bars, in the casinos, in the bingo halls, in the movies. But they come running, they hear this explosion, they come running from everywhere, and they watch. And what happens next is that the U-boat commander decides to pilot his boat around the stern of the Gulf of America, so that he is now on the landward side of the boat. So he is between the ship. He's between the Gulf of America and the coast, which creates this silhouette that everyone on the beach can see. And you're there, right?
No.
You saw
I saw the whole thing from my house.
You saw the silhouette?
I saw everything. It scared us to death.
We'll talk to you some more. We'll get you into it. I just want to confirm you could see this thing, right? You could see it. You knew what it was. He's nodding his head yes.
The nice thing about the German submarine, he stayed south of the tanker for all his torpedoes and cannon fire and machine gun bullets and tracers would ricochet off and go north and not come to the shoreline. Not a single shot hit the shoreline. The skipper of the submarine was very nice about that.
Yeah. No, he does not shoot. And in fact, in his book that he writes, and in some of the interviews he gives, he says that he goes to the landward side because he's scared that he will fire over the Gulf of America, miss, and hit the people on the beach.
He was very careful not to do that.
Additionally, people have argued that because there was a land breeze that night, and because the flames were blowing out to sea, that he was safer on the landward side. Finally, the boat is listing to starboard because they've been struck on the starboard side. So the hull is up on the land side. And they would have wanted to make sure this ship didn't get salvaged and put back in service. So they would have had a better opportunity to sink it from that side. The final possibility, and my personal favorite, I think more than anything else, that Hartigan put himself between the Gulf of America and the beach was to create a spectacular display. And he becomes famous for this back in Germany. Hitler, that very week, goes to the Reichstag and brags that his submarines are sinking American ships within sight of American cities.
He scared all of us. Everybody on the shore was fighting the Germans were coming.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Let's just, bananas. Everybody see the bananas one since that's up? 2 nights before he sinks the Gulf of America, he sinks a ship called the Esparta. And the Esparta is owned by the United Fruit Company. And it's a refrigerated fruit boat. And apparently, a lot of things wash up on shore. There are stories that some dead bodies washed ashore. We know with absolute certainty for decades after the event, that tar washes ashore. And you would go swimming, and you would come out of the water, or you would walk on the beach, and you would have this black tar on your feet. Does anyone else besides me remember this?
You couldn't walk on the beach for at least 2 years. It was loaded with black tar.
And you would use turpentine or lighter fluid to take it off.
Burn like sin, too.
Yeah. So the beach was covered, but in addition, bananas washed ashore. And if you read it, the Department of Health said the bananas are fine to eat, you just should wash them. Wash them carefully. So in any event, he sinks the boat, he comes around to the landward side, he begins to machine gun the radio antenna so that the Gulf of America cannot send out a distress signal. And at the same time, they take their 10.5 centimeter deck gun and they begin to shell and fire approximately a dozen shells into the bottom of the hull of the Gulf of America, sinking it forever, although it takes a while. The ship is 485 feet long. It has 90,000 barrels of kerosene. That's what empties into the ocean, as well as possibly another 10,000 barrels of diesel fuel that was to run the ship. It's the kerosene that creates the big explosion. Passing Eastern Airlines flight reports that the flames are 500 feet in the air. And that's just a domestic flight that happened to be flying by from Miami to New York. So they shell it, they take off, the ship settles by the stern, and the bow, and there's a picture of that in there too, the bow bobs on the surface for 6 days before finally sinking. If you read either the New York the Times Union article or the article in Newsline that I wrote, you know that it's a fish haven and a dive destination to this day. You can go out and dive on the Gulf of America if you're into diving. Hartigan leaves. Later that, because of the events that had occurred 2 and 3 nights earlier, the Navy had dispatched a destroyer from Miami called the USS Dahlgren. And later that night, after he sinks the Gulf of America, he suddenly realizes that there's a fishing boat nearby that is signaling that they can see a U-boat. And he checks the coordinates and realizes they're talking about him. And then he sees a boat, another ship, approaching very fast. So he dives. And the Dahlgren passes over the Gulf of America and launches a depth charge array. And the depth charges do severe damage to the U-123. Such damage that Hartigan's prepared to abandon his submarine. And they begin to prepare to flood the submarine, and they would put on gas masks, little air breathing masks, and float to the surface. And they're ready to do this. And Hartigan goes to open the hatch, and the cold water splashes his face and scares him. And he tries a second time, and he's even more scared. And so he decides, in that moment, he can hear the Dahlgren taking off, leaving the scene. And he decides he'll stay on the bottom and try and fix the boat, which he does. He fixes it well enough that the night later they sink 2 more ships off of Cape Canaveral within 4 miles of each other. And they then head home to Germany. And when he gets to Germany, he writes a book. And the book's called Aufgefechtsstationen, which means essentially 2 battle stations. It's a bestseller in Germany in 1943. It's co-written by Admiral Dönitz, who's the commander of the entire, well, eventually he becomes the Führer of Germany at the very end. But he's commander of the entire German Navy. And he meets Hitler. Hitler gives him a Knight's Cross with oak leaves. And he lives quite a good life. He becomes an oil executive, works for Texaco for a while, despite sinking the SS Oklahoma, which was one of their boats. He becomes quite a good golfer. He becomes a member of the Bundestag, which is essentially like our parliament, like a parliament. And probably, in some ways, maybe the most interesting thing about Reinhard Hartigan is he's still alive today. He's 104 years old and he still lives in Bremen, Germany. And sometimes I give this speech in the mornings and I'll say, I like to think he's in a senior center in Bremen hearing about how we won the war, right? Just a couple things on some of the people. Oh, let's talk about time for a minute, because I said I do want to talk about time. I have two sort of controversial theories. One is that Hartigan did this partially for the publicity. And I believe that. He had tried to sink a ship off New York on his first trip to America in January of 1942. He'd actually piloted the ship into New York, his submarine into New York Harbor. He almost ran it aground on Sandy Hook. And he was looking, he let everybody come up on deck, much as he did here in St. Augustine, and look at the lights of New York. And no ships, no oil tankers came along for him to sink while he was there. He eventually sinks a ship called the Coimbra, about 60 miles off Long Island, about 90 miles from New York. And they could hear that, the explosion on Long Island. So 60 miles, you can hear the explosion. 4 miles, you can imagine how terrified people were. The other thing is, what time was it? Well, let me give my theory and then you can tell me what you think. Maybe you remember. Basically, we know what time the torpedo hits because we know what time it was in Germany. And every German military unit, every occupied territory, every consul, every embassy, everybody that the Germans were controlling at that point was on the same time. And it was German wartime. It was essentially Central European time +2. So double daylight savings. Now based on that, we know that it was 10:20 Eastern War time in Jack's Beach, the night that the submarine launches the torpedo. The thing is that wartime was essentially year-round daylight savings time. And Congress had authorized this at the end of January 1942 to take effect February 8, 1942. So the question is, did the people on the beach think it was 10:20, or were they still on the old time and thinking to themselves that it was 9:20? And I suspect that they thought it was 9:20. Most of the first-hand recollections indicate it happened between 9 and 10, not between 10 and 11. A lot of the stories, Townsend Hawks being a famous one, he talks about how he's coming home from having dinner at his mother's house, which seems more likely at 9:30 than 10:30. Jean Swanson, who taught at Fletcher and every year gave a speech about this event to the students, says she was in the movies. And forget it, I think she's 11 years old at the time. And again, if we believe the story, then 9:20 makes more sense than 10:20. Townsend Hawks is the most famous. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say I wasn't there. I was in a Model 8 Ford with my mom and dad, and I was very young. And either I remember hearing it, or maybe it's just my mom and dad talking about it. I really can't distinguish the difference. But I would guess, and this is really weak, but certainly we were headed to Palm Valley. And I'd take the earlier time. We didn't stay up that late, you know, there's kerosene lamps. I remember my mom talking about silverware washing up on the beach. And all kinds of.
There could be, you know, stuff washes up on the beach from wrecks, and there would have been, you know, all sorts of stuff. I know I've heard bodies, the biggest thing being the tar. What time do you think it was, since you were there?
Me?
Yeah.
We watched it from our house, I guess at 9 o'clock, 9:30, something like that, it wasn't late. But
You know-
we were all frightened and we had no defense against that German submarine. We called the Coast Guard, we had nothing come out of Bayport to help that ship. No planes, nothing would help.
Yeah, it's over an hour before the Air Force gets there and begins to drop flares. The rescuers would have taken even longer.
The next day, they had some called auxiliary Coast Guardmen, which were people who had pleasure boats, who were auxiliary Coast Guard. They went out there to look for survivors the next day. That's the only thing we saw for trying to help the people on those.
But thanks for the time. That's good. That's what I
early.
think. We'll get that second. I think what happens is, the official time is 10:20, but school was already in session. I know that in many parts of the country they didn't embrace this concept of year-round daylight savings time, even though that's what FDR wanted. One more thing. We'll just cruise to the end. The U-123. Hardigan's still alive. The U-123